faithful family finances. Okay? Faithful family finances. We've talked about commitment, leaving, weaving, cleaving. We've talked about the intimacy, the sexual aspects of marriage. We've talked about last time loving your spouse to heaven, how we need to be building each other up and focusing in our direction toward heaven as our goal. Today, money, finances. You might say, really? Is that a big thing? It is a big thing. It really is. The average marriage that ends in divorce, what does it look like in the beginning? Well, on the surface, it looks like any other marriage. Happy day, great celebration, and the marriage begins. Got a quote from Larry Burkett. He's a financial advisor I wanted to share. He says, I have never counseled a single couple who came to me and said, Larry, we just wanted to share with you our 5-year goal. 5 years ago when we got married, we set out to get so miserably into debt that I can't stand my wife and she can't stand me. We don't ever pray together. We don't ever go to church anymore, but we are right where we wanted to be. No couple makes that for a 5-year goal. You know what they often say next, Larry said? How in the world did this happen? How did we let ourselves get into a mess like this? And what can we do to get out of it? And Larry always starts by saying, the best thing you can do is to never let it happen in the first place. Now that may not sound like good comfort to someone who's down in a hole. But still, it's a life lesson. And hopefully we can learn from the mistakes of others, right? It's really only 2 ways to learn things, either by personal experience or vicariously. Learn through other people's experiences and hopefully learn from their successes and also learn from their failures and avoid such. But it really reminds me of King David. We talked about David and Nathan in our teen class this morning. What would have been the best way for King David to avoid the sword in his household as a part of the punishment for his adultery, coveting, and murder? What would have been the best way? To never go down that road to start with. Okay? Friends, it is undeniable that money trouble is not the only cause of broken marriages, but it is statistically, from all surveys I've ever seen, the number one cause for stress, for fracturing, for failures in marriage. Many don't pay attention until it's a monster just on top of them, destroying them. So this is a Bible topic. In fact, Jesus spoke about money more than any other topic if you do a topical study of his words. Money is a relevant subject, especially for us here in America. What did Jesus say about wealth? About the rich? It's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom. And you've heard me say before, and I'll say it again, a common middle-class life in America is very wealthy by global standards. So guess what? It's hard for rich people to go to heaven. Not impossible, but it is a challenge. It's hard for us to go to heaven, friends, because of our wealth. And money causes so many problems. Marriages start off and there's all this optimism and excitement and plans. But if there's no focus on the details when it comes to finances, it is very easy for that first 5 years in retrospect to look like, what in the world are we doing? We can't pay our bills. When you can't pay your bills, there's all this stress. There's a natural conflict that wants to arise, and it's just not a good place to be. The bottom line, stewards fidelity. We need to be faithful in our marriages, yes. We need to be faithful to God. That was our scripture reading. Good stewards must be faithful. And you know, stewardship of our lives is a broad topic. Are we good stewards of our time? Are we good stewards of our abilities? Are we good stewards of our resources? Are we good stewards of our money, the money that God allows us to earn or blesses our lives with? Are we faithfully using such in God's in God's sight? That's really the question. So I'll tell you, just like the pew packer fact from Deuteronomy 28, if you obey, you'll be blessed. If you disobey, you'll be cursed. How you use money, how you interact with money in your life is either going to be a blessing or a cursing to you. If you allow it to control you, if you allow your desires to cause you to be a very poor steward financially, it's going to be a hard row to hoe. It's going to be tough. But money, time, abilities, all these things can be tremendous tools, resources, gifts from the Almighty to be leveraged for good. But it's going to be up to us how we use those things. So 6 points today, and these are really things when I sit down and think about it that Renee and I have tried to pursue. I think they are biblical concepts. There is some opinion here, so I'm telling you this. This is how I'm looking at things, how we've tried to manage, and we've not always done so perfectly. But point number 1, and this is certainly biblical, you need to aim for being self-supporting. This even ties in back with what we said on our first lesson from Genesis 2, and that should be 2:24, sorry. A man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. The two shall become one flesh. It's a terrible plan for a young couple to say, let's get married and we'll live in my parents' basement. That might happen circumstantially, but that should not be plan A, okay? That should only be plan B when other disasters have fallen and, okay, you got to live somewhere. Mom and Dad, can you help us out for a little bit of time here? But that should not be the plan. Galatians 6:5, each one is to bear his own burden. That doesn't mean we can't help each other, but we need to plan to be able to support ourselves. And even Paul put it very powerfully to Timothy in 1 Timothy 5:8 that a believer who does not provide for his own, in other words, be self-supporting, you take care of your family. If you're not doing that, you're worse than an infidel. One that not only doesn't believe in God, but is actively trying to turn other people away from God. Someone who doesn't take responsibility for his family financially. Worse than an infidel. Those are pretty hard words. Now, I know there are times where we all need help, and that's where the church and even the government can come into play, and you know, again, sometimes we need help. But the plan should be, the goal should be, the aim should be, I'm going to take care of my family. I'm going to provide as God has provided opportunity to do such. So a young man that wants to get married, he needs to have a job. He needs to keep that job. And how do you do that? So much wisdom from the Proverbs. We've studied the Proverbs before. So much wisdom about work ethic, about how to handle money. I mean, ultimately, you keep your job by keeping your boss happy, right? Well, I'm self-employed, Stephen. Well, who's your boss? All your clients. You keep your clients happy, and you keep the job, right? You need to be a good, hardworking, dependable worker. Don't be lazy. Don't be late. Be industrious. Be respectful. Just some broad wisdom from the Proverbs on how to keep a job. And, you know, you never quit a job until you got something else or better lined up, right? And that's just good common sense there. And sometimes in our society, maybe you need 2 jobs. That's not necessarily ideal, but there are circumstances where it's helpful. So besides being self-supporting, having that plan, number 2, provide for and educate children. Now, this is not me getting on a soapbox about home education. I think educating children, there's always a home front to that. But even folks that send to public school, there's nothing wrong with that. Any way you educate your kids, you need to be involved. You need to make sure they're learning what they need to learn, especially spiritually. So I do believe it's possible to do home educating poorly, and I believe it's possible to send your kids to public school and do a poor job of that by not being involved and just not tending to their influences and all sorts of other things. But in general, If you're going to be faithful in the financial realm, this is important. You say, well, what does this have to do with finances? Guess what if you don't educate those children? Guess what if you don't provide for them properly and give them every advantage so that they can learn and get ready to launch out into the world on their own? Guess what? Well, they may never move out. You may have to kick them out. You may have a lot of regret if you're not spending the time and the effort to provide for them. I mean, it goes without saying. Suitable food, clothing, shelter, right? But ultimately, training children in the way they should go. We'll probably have another lesson just on that concept maybe a month or so from now, because it's a part of this family and marriage series for sure. The Bible says how we need to train and provide and prepare our children to enter out into the world. They're not going to be our little babies forever. They're not going to be toddlers forever. And Rose, where's Rose at? Oh, she's in the bathroom. Can I embarrass you for a minute, Rosie? Doesn't know what to say to that. I see Renee and I can only imagine what she's thinking because I'm thinking it. Rose, she's 5. She's our youngest child, and being the most immature chronologically, she'll sometimes say some really off-the-wall, goofy, cute stuff. And it makes me think, and I suspect when I look at Renee's eyes, I'm like, yeah, she's thinking about it too, you know. The older kids, they say some dumb stuff too, but it's not cute like the little ones. But, the innocence, the purity, and, every now and then, what would it be like to have another kid? But we're grandparents now. That ship sailed. But anyway, these things cost money. They cost time. The necessities and the training. Your plan A should not be, well, if this doesn't work out, the government will be there as my safety net, or I know the church will bail me out if I dig myself into a terrible. That should not be plan A. Plan A should be provide, educate, and some of these verses come to mind. Matthew 6:25 talks about seeking first the kingdom of God and what is right. That pertains to how we raise our kids. Don't worry about it. When you bring that new baby home, there's 1,000 things to learn and 1,000 things potentially to be concerned about. Take a deep breath. One diaper at a time, right? One feeding at a time. One new thing at a time. No benefit worrying about it anyway, right? You can't change things you worry about. Do your best. Trust God. Seek to do what's right. Romans 8:28, God promises all things in the big picture will work out for good to those who love Him. That's not a generic promise to all humanity. That is a specific promise to those who love God. How do you know if you love God? If you love me, you'll keep my commandments, Jesus said. His commandments are not burdensome. 1 John 5, verse 3. I think about Deuteronomy 6 and 7, when Moses laid forth a great pattern. You need to bring your children to God. You need to train them in the covenant they were born into back under his time. When you rise up, when you sit down, when you walk by the way, every aspect of life is a training time for children. Take advantage of it, friends. Number 3, you want to be a good steward, you want to have faithful family finances, give generously to God's work. Help the needy. This goes right along with the first and second commandments, right? If you're loving God with every fiber of your being, guess what? You're loving Him financially. If you're loving your neighbor as yourself, guess what? You're helping your neighbor financially when opportunities arise. For sure. For sure. It should show with your finances. It's been said before, even if you've never met a person, if you had full, uncontrolled access to their calendar, and if their calendar had a record of everything they're doing and their appointments and how they spend their time and recreation, if their calendar had all that information, and then their finances, if you had a record of every dollar they spent and where their money goes, just to see how people spend their time and how they spend their money, you can learn a tremendous amount about the heart of that individual. Where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be. So does it show? Does our love show? I think about some of these principles. We know 1 Corinthians 16. Paul gives the command there that those in Corinth, and he taught the same place to every congregation. Therefore, by deduction, we teach this today, that you should lay by in store as you've been prospered the past week. If you've been blessed financially, it is a good thing. It's a good concept to be giving back in a very explicit way to God. Now you might say, well, do I need to, Stephen? Or how much do I have to give? Well, the Old Testament regulated it through the tithing and the offerings. The New Testament doesn't specify, other than things like 2 Corinthians 9. God loves a cheerful giver. He wants your attitude to be such. And then he goes on to say, if you want to have a big harvest, what do you got to do? You got to plant a lot of seed. You got to plant a lot of seed. It's been my experience, friends, and in my observations as well, that you cannot outgive God. If you're generous with the way you live, the way you behave in your gifts toward God and others, it's hard to outgive Him. Ephesians 4:28 talks about the need for a good work ethic. But what is one of the reasons why we work and earn money? Well, so we can buy a bunch of stuff, right? Well, that's not what Paul says exactly. He says, let him who stole steal no longer. So be honest, have integrity. Rather, let him labor, work with his hands what is good, that he might have something to give him who has need. There's different ways to help needy people. Sometimes it's with our time. Sometimes it's with our resources. Sometimes it's with a listening ear. Sometimes it's with financial resources. Money doesn't solve all problems, but it does. It is a tool that can be used for great good. Psalm 37:25 also comes to mind here on this point, friends. 37:25 reads, I have been young and now am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging bread. I put a lot of stock in that. Oh, but Stephen, if I give generously to God, I won't be able to do this or that, or afford this or that, Listen, I'm not saying you should be foolish. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a budget. Have a budget. But plan. Be intentional. And I'm getting into my next point here. Number 4, don't overextend yourself financially. Have a budget. Now, maybe your budget is more formal. Maybe it's less formal. But you need to have a basic idea of how much money you got coming in and how much money you got going out and where it's going. These are things we should try to train our kids. When our kids get an allowance, now they get an allowance for tasks, for chores that they do. If they don't do the chore, they don't get the allowance. But when they do the chore, they get allowance. And we try, even from the young years, to say, okay, your money can go in 3 basic ways, right? You can save it, you can spend it, and you can give it to God. I know there's different ways to analyze it, but that's the big 3. And you ought to have, some in each of those categories. Now, as our children age, I don't necessarily follow up. I don't demand Abel tells me what he's giving now. He's working to save a lot, making a little bit of money. Abram as well. Of course, they're saving for college and paying for vehicles and things. But no matter where you are in life, if you've got some income, if you've got some financial blessing, I think biblically you ought to be giving to God. Don't let it be a drudgery. Don't let it be like a burden. It ought to be from a cheerful heart, just realizing how deeply God has blessed all of us. 3 common ways people get overextended financially. House, vehicles, just lifestyle in general. And then lifestyle creeps. So it's like, I'm not really making any more money, or it doesn't feel like it, because now you got, another payment or another this or that. Be so careful, friends. We are different in our God-given opportunities and resources. Don't fall into the common trap of saying, well, this person has this, so I have to have it too. There's going to be things that you are blessed with that other people aren't, and perhaps vice versa. Vehicles, I try to encourage my people that I have influence over, my children and whatnot. Hey, don't buy a brand new vehicle. Normally, that's tough financially. If you're in a position to buy a new vehicle with cash, that's between you and the Lord. So be it. If you can use it for good, great. But a lot of people, they end up with these payments over years and years and years, and they get upside down. What they owe is more than what the thing's worth. So, we need to make good financial decisions the best we can. And even the little things can add up in lifestyle, right? If you're one of these people that likes fancy coffee, wow, that can add up quick. $5-7 a day, right? Wow, that's a lot of money. At work, every chance I get, I encourage some of our guys to, give up smoking, drivers or wash bay techs. And, there's the health aspect, there's the financial aspect. You're smoking a pack a day. That is thousands of dollars a year. And so have a budget. Know where your money's going. Be intentional with every dollar, okay? Pressures surround us, and a lot of them are, we bring them on ourselves because, well, they have this and that's cool, so we want to have the newest phone and we want to have a pretty new vehicle. And friends, you can't do everything. So make sure that you got your priorities such that you're loving God and your fellow man, and I think He'll take care of you, and these other things will work themselves out. Proverbs 22:7, right after the verse about training up our children, it says, "The rich rules over the poor. The borrower is servant to the lender." It really is a great feeling not to have any debt. There's a certain freedom to that. Now, I'm not saying all debt is wrong, but this is a true statement. It's always been true. The borrower is a servant to the lender. So keep that in mind. If you can get yourself in a position where you pay cash for your vehicles, and maybe the only kind of debt you ever take on would be for a home, boy, that would be great. But the more we can pay cash, the better we can, easier it is to live within our means and to not have the pressure of tough finances on the marriage and the family. Again, it's not a sin to be wealthy, but it is dangerous, as we've already said. And here's the key on this point. Make sure your motivations are proper. Make sure your heart is content with much or little. Would your life be ruined if you lost your nice house? If you could only drive a car from the 90s? Would you just be devastated? Is that the end of your world? Friend, it's not the end. Don't trust in things. Make sure your heart is right. Don't be covetous. God's always with us. These are some very profound Bible principles we need to make sure not to get away from. Are the things we own tools for God's glory or idols? That's a question we really got to be honest about. As many of you know, Renee and I are in the process of building a new house, and that's been something we've been working toward for really 8 years since we paid off our current house on Main Street. And it's exciting. It's a little bit intimidating at the same time, taking on new things. And we're hopeful that the new house will be a great fellowship tool for our family and even for the church. We love to have people over, and we're thinking hopefully it'll be a great tool for that. But you know what? If life circumstances change and 2 years from now, it's like, you know what? It's just too much. We walk away. We sell it. Go back down and live on Main Street, or maybe we'll move into one of your neighborhoods. But we're hoping and we're planning it to be a great tool and not an idol. But friends, any of our purchases, we need to be thinking about these things. Number 5, have an emergency fund. Plan for the future. What do you mean an emergency fund? Well, this is going to be, your preference. But man, 3 months, I think should be a bare minimum. 3 months of your earnings. So whatever you make over a 3-month period, you ideally have that in some sort of liquid form where you can access it quick if you need it. In a savings account. Man, high yield savings accounts today, you can get 4 or 5% in the right place. That's great. Almost keeps up with inflation anyway, right? So put your money where you can get it if you need it. You know what that money can be used for? What major car repairs. Maybe that's the cash to buy the next vehicle when your vehicle needs replaced. That's the cash when your job changes or other setbacks. Maybe big medical bills come in. But you got a little bit of wiggle room, okay? You're not living paycheck to paycheck where that next thing is just going to bury you in stress and financially. I don't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere around $400. The majority of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. That is sad. That's tragic. May it not be so with us. Wise people count the cost before they make decisions. Luke 14:20. They think about, well, if I do this, what's this going to cost me financially and in time? What kind of headaches is this going to bring? Or does the positive outweigh the negative? I don't remember who said it, but they used the word, an emergency fund. It might have been Dave Ramsey. It's a lubricant for life's struggles and strains. Because really, what do you do if you've got absolutely no money and then you got that middle medical thing? Junior breaks a leg, or you get laid off work, or the car needs a serious repair. Then what? It's just a bad place to be in. So you can have a little bit of emergency fund there. That's great. If you're one that plans to retire one day, plan for that when you're young. Start saving. And you might think, well, a little bit saved now, what difference does it make? If you'd like to see, just get on YouTube and look up videos about the power of compound interest. It's incredible. If you start saving just a little bit even when you're young, putting it aside into some sort of retirement account. And you know what? If you have money set aside, maybe you'll need it one day. If you don't, you can choose to leave a great inheritance. That's a biblical concept, right? Godly people will leave an inheritance for their children's children. That's what Proverbs 13:22 says. And I even think about Corinthians, chapter 12, verse 14. Paul says, "For the third time I'm ready to come to you, and I will not be burdensome to you, for I do not seek you but yours." Here it is. "For the children ought not to lay up for the parents, but the parents for the children." Now, I'm not saying it's not helpful when we get in our older years for the children to honor their father and mother. That's biblical. Absolutely it is. But ideally, you don't want to be a burden, if you can help it, on your children. That's a biblical concept. Number 6, and finally here, you may disagree with this. Again, this is just my perspective. If you have enough where you can save or plan for special trips, I'm not saying annually, travel a little bit, see the country. America's a beautiful place. Illinois is a beautiful place, but if you've been here your whole life, there's other cool things to see. I remember seeing the Grand Canyon over a decade ago. Wow. Seeing some of the topography out west, it's just mind-blowing. And Renee makes fun of me because we're driving out in New Mexico and this big tumbleweeds go rolling across the road. I'm like, that's really a thing, And if you've ever been out west, you're like, obviously it's a thing, Stephen. But playing in a park, these 3-4 foot diameter tumbleweeds rolling through, it's a neat world out there that God's made. It's a beautiful place. So many neat things to see. You need time for rest. Maybe your recreation is just going fishing locally or doing some hunting or maybe some other hobby. But some of my best memories with our kids are piling into the van and with Renee's good planning and all the blue crates jammed in the back, taking a couple weeks and just driving around, seeing different parts of the world. That's great. Mix up the daily routine, see new experiences or see new places, have new shared experiences with the family. Great memories. Great memories. And again, you don't even think about things like that unless you've got a budget, unless you got some emergency fund built up. But it can be great to get away. You know of what I speak. And obviously, don't think for a minute that you got to have money of any sort of significant amount to be a good parent, to be a good spouse. Some of the best things can also be just the time investment, cooking for your spouse, going out for a date at the park, go have a picnic together. That doesn't have to cost a lot of money for it to be memorable and to be investing in the love bank, so to speak, of your relationship. Friends, the lesson's yours. Are you faithful with your finances before God? You don't answer to me. You answer to the Lord. Are you where you need to be? Finances can ruin a lot of lives. They can make things miserable. Be a good steward. Be faithful as God has entrusted into your stewardship. If you need to respond by having prayer requests, or if you do need help physically or spiritually, we'd love to help baptize any who want to commit their lives to Christ and be added to the kingdom. Really, friends, if you have a need at all, please come as we stand and sing. Thank you for watching our live stream this morning. We hope you found it enjoyable and, even more importantly, true to God's Word. Here at the Church of Christ in Clinton, we stream the sermon part of our assembly. But if you were here in person, you'd find that we have beautiful congregational a cappella singing, as well as public prayers led by different men, as well as teenage boys. And we also serve the Lord's Supper after the sermon every Sunday morning. Communion, or the Lord's Supper, is where we will remember Jesus' sacrifice. We'll partake of unleavened bread and fruit of the vine, symbols that He set up in Matthew 26 in preparation for His death. We do not ask for your money if you ever attend in person. We do have a contribution box mounted in the foyer, but it's there for our members to give as they wish. Giving is between you and God. It's never something that we would beg you for. So friends, we would love for you to join us in person if you can. And if there's any way we can serve you, reach out to us. Our phone number is 217-935-5058. You can call or text that number 24/7. We would be honored to serve you in any way possible. God bless.